You know that feeling when you look at the news and it just hits you like this overwhelming wall of noise? I mean, one day it's a massive spike in the price of a carton of eggs, the next it's an interest rate hike on your mortgage, and then, you find out the bus that normally takes you home just suddenly doesn't run after 8 p.m. anymore. It feels completely chaotic, right? Like a dozen totally separate, totally frustrating stories. But here's the secret. They really aren't separate stories at all. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring a fascinating guide called Politics and Economics, Relearned. And together, we're going to transform that daily wall of noise into a clear, totally readable map. Okay, let's dive right into this. Because at their absolute core, every single one of those frustrating headlines asks a variation of the exact same question. When our time, our money, our labor, and our attention are limited, who exactly gets to decide how they're used? By what authority? And, with what duties to everyone else? This right here is where politics and economics completely collide. Think of it this way. Politics is simply the way a community makes binding choices, and economics is the study of choices under scarcity. And the two meet right in your everyday life. Literally, anytime a public rule changes a private decision, or a private decision creates some sort of public consequence. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, look, I don't have a degree in political science or macroeconomics. There is no way I can possibly understand this whole system. Well, there's this absolutely brilliant quote from our source material that really grounds our whole exploration today. It says, "She could not hold the whole map. She knew how to follow a line." It's so good, right? Because you don't need to memorize every single legislative chamber or draw perfect supply and demand curves to navigate the modern world. You just need to know how to trace a single policy, a single price, or a single missing bus route right back to its origin. So, here is the literal legend for our maps today. First, we'll cover power and democratic choice. Second, markets, money, and scarcity. Third, the global and digital future. And finally, navigating your own map. Section 1, Power and Democratic Choice, the Rules of Power. Let's start with how the rules of the game are actually written. A healthy democracy is not some magical utopian society where no one ever argues. Actually, it's the opposite. Disagreement is proof that people with genuinely different lives are still trying to share the exact same political community. Politics is all about making binding choices without erasing that conflict. And to do that fairly, we have to know where power comes from, what limits it, and how decisions can actually be appealed. Think about the flow of authority. A constitution isn't just a list of rules for citizens. Its primary job is literally to control the controllers. It starts with voters and their fundamental rights, moves to the legislature, which actually makes the laws, the executive, which implements them, and the courts, which review them. Because, let's be honest, good intentions are an incredibly unreliable safeguard against overreach. Power has to be limited in advance because leaders, majorities, and even the experts can all be wrong. Now, let's look at how this builds into the actual lawmaking process. How often do we see a headline saying a new benefit has passed, and we instantly assume it's a done deal? But look at the actual pathway. A bill gets introduced, it's debated in committee, it's approved by a chamber, and then it has to actually commence and be reviewed. Pass does absolutely not always mean enforce. A government agency still has to issue regulations, create the actual forms, hire the staff, build the IT systems, and, well, we all know how fast the DMV moves, right? Until the funding is actually allocated and the implementation office is set up, a political promise isn't a reality you can actually use. As those laws are being debated, you are going to hear a lot of noise. And to cut through it, it is absolutely crucial to separate factual claims from value claims. A factual claim is testable, like saying rents rose 6% last year. We can look at the actual data and verify that. A value claim, on the other hand, gives priority to different ideals. It's an argument, like arguing that housing stability should outweigh a landlord's freedom to raise rent, or conversely, that property rights absolutely must be preserved to encourage the building of new housing. Evidence can definitely correct a fact, but it cannot, by itself, determine how much liberty should be traded for security. Recognizing this difference helps you pinpoint exactly where a disagreement actually lives. Section 2. Markets, money, and scarcity, the mechanics of the economy. All right, let's shift gears and look under the hood at the economic engine underneath all of this. Economics is ultimately about how we behave when we literally can't have everything we want, and how resources move when public rules alter our private decisions. Think about where the supply and demand lines meet, equilibrium. Prices act as these incredible, decentralized flashing signals. A rising price screams scarcity. It tells buyers, hey, maybe conserve or substitute this. And it tells suppliers, hey, bring way more of this to the market. When the price of food goes up, it's really rarely just one villain's fault. It's usually this complex interaction of a poor harvest, maybe high energy costs, transport disruptions, and stronger demand, all shifting those lines until a brand new price emerges. Let's bring this directly to your own wallet. Imagine your boss gives you a 3% raise. You'd probably celebrate, right? That is your nominal wage, the actual dollar amount printed on your check. But if inflation, meaning the general rise in prices, is sitting at 4%, your real wage, which is your actual purchasing power, just went down by 1%. You can literally afford fewer goods this year than you could last year, despite getting a raise. This is exactly why inflation matters so deeply. It silently erodes the store of value function of your hard-earned money. And speaking of inflation, how do we actually know what it really is? Take a look at this snapshot of global economic data from August 2026. Notice the different numbers? The US sitting at 3.4%, the UK at 2.9%, Australia at 3.8%. But before you panic or celebrate a headline comparing these, you really have to read the fine print. Are they all measuring the exact same basket of goods? Do they treat housing costs the same way? Are they seasonally adjusted? You always have to harmonize comparisons, which basically means make sure you are comparing apples to apples before you let a single statistic completely shape your worldview. So, if inflation is running hot, what does the government actually do? Well, they typically turn to the central bank, which pulls its primary lever, the policy interest rate. But follow the journey that rate hike actually takes. It is not instant. It doesn't magically lower the price of eggs overnight. The central bank changes the policy rate. Eventually, that alters market and loan rates. That, over time, changes household spending and business asset values. And finally, way down the line, that impacts output, jobs, and inflation. This is exactly why a variable rate homeowner feels the pain immediately, but groceries still cost the exact same. It's a delayed, highly uncertain journey. The broader economy might not actually cool down for months. As all these economic realities play out, societies constantly have to decide how to manage the resulting inequalities. And this brings up a massive value debate: equal opportunity versus equal outcomes. And they are definitely not simple opposites. Equal opportunity focuses on removing barriers, like making sure everyone has access to good schooling, nutrition, and a market completely from discrimination. Equal outcomes, however, focuses on ensuring identical final results for everyone. In practice, most social protection policies aim to guarantee a basic floor of human dignity, protecting people against the totally unpredictable risks of illness or job loss without mandating that every single person's final financial outcome is perfectly identical. Section 3. The Global and Digital Future. Climate and AI. Okay, so we've mapped out our local rules and our wallets. But what about those massive horizon-level challenges that just completely ignore national borders? Climate change is the ultimate global externality, a cost created by some but paid by everyone, across generations. And the truth is, there is no single magic bullet for this. We need a highly structured portfolio. We need mitigation to reduce emissions and adaptation to protect our infrastructure from the heat and floods that are frankly already locked in. We need to price the risk and invest in new grid technologies. But here's why this matters the most: the just transition. If we just jack up energy costs without providing rebates or mobility alternatives for rural and low-income households, the policy might look incredibly efficient on a spreadsheet, but it's going to be politically unsustainable in the real world. Now, we can actually take a very similar portfolio approach to the digital frontier, AI, because governance isn't some binary choice between completely banning AI or letting it just run entirely unchecked. It's really about matching the safeguard directly to the risk. A low-impact AI that just helps you draft a quick email, that might just need basic security. But a high-impact AI, say an algorithm deciding if you qualify for a mortgage or automatically screening your resume for a job, that requires strict human review, clear audit trails, and a real route to appeal the decision. Section 4. Navigating your own map. The toolkit. We have covered a lot of ground today, all the way from the flow of constitutional power down to interest rates and AI governance. But the absolute most important part of this explainer is how you take this and apply it to your own life. When you see a viral post screaming about some new policy or economic disaster, don't just instantly share it. Run it through the first few steps of the 7-step claim check. First, make the claim testable. If a post says taxes exploded, translate that into a testable sentence like central government tax receipts increased by X%. Second, trace the source chain. Find the actual original law or transcript. Third, check the date and scope. An article published in August might be quoting data from June. And fourth, always read the denominator. A program doubling its reach means two totally different things if it went from 1 person to 2 people versus 1 million to 2 million. Ultimately, no one needs to memorize every single fact in the world. That's impossible. But in an era of deepfakes, algorithmic sorting, and just overwhelming information, foundational knowledge is literally more important than ever. It is exactly what gives you the power to question an automated answer, to trace a frustrating rule back to its origin, and to demand real accountability. It gives you the confidence to safely update your worldview. The noise out there, it's really just data waiting to be organized. So, are you ready to draw your map?